tonight's presentation is about one of those little eddies in our collecting habitat here, the pilgrimage to Lebanon BSA Camporee that was held in Lebanon, Connecticut, which is a small town north of New London and Norwich and east of Hartford that still only has about 4,000 people who live in it. And it was held from 1949 to 1956. The Camporee portion was held from 1949 to 1956, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But Lebanon has a very interesting history that goes back to the Revolution, and well before the Revolution, actually. But during the American Revolution is when it became a famous place. So I have collected this as one of my little side collections for years. And you occasionally see a patch that looks a little bit like this, or you'll see one that's a little different design later. You'll see them on eBay every now and again, or somebody will post about it in Facebook and wonder what the heck it is. And so I thought I would do a quick presentation on it. So Pilgrimage to Lebanon. Just a little bit about myself. Been around for a long time, which means I'm not young. Not terribly old, but not young either. Started collecting like Johnny at the 1969 National Jamboree. I grew up in Connecticut. As a matter of fact, Mike Clark and I grew up in the same town. He's on the presentation tonight. And so I gravitated towards collecting New England. And that's, although I used to collect lots of things from all around the United States, I narrowed my focus over the years to things from New England. So my collecting interests at this point are New England camp patches, all camps, all issues, which is crazy in itself. New England council strips, Jamboree contingent memorabilia from councils and lodges from New England, but only through 2010. I gave up after 2010. It got too crazy. New England trail medals and patches. I collect Region 1 and Northeast Region memorabilia of all types. I collect the Mohawk Indian Village from the Eastern States Exposition, which I've talked about in a presentation before. I collect this Pilgrimage to Lebanon memorabilia. I still fiddle around with national annual meeting patches just for fun. I have a fairly large, at this point, collection of scouting items with a Coast Guard theme, because I was a Coast Guard officer for 26 years. I collect my own lodge down in Virginia. The only thing I really focus on in the OA anymore, which is Juan Seneca Lodge, and SR7A conclave memorabilia, and of course SR7A is now gone. And I collect honor, quality, and journey to excellence patches, which I've also done a presentation in the past. Okay, so this is a Word document that I actually prepared about my collection of Pilgrimage to Lebanon Camporee memorabilia. So first of all, I guess a little bit of background here. As I mentioned, Lebanon is a small town. It's still fairly agricultural. It has one of the largest common areas called a green in New England. It's one of the only ones, if not the only one, that still has some agriculture attached to it. And it was a town that was incorporated in 1700, but its history goes back obviously back to the indigenous folks, but it also goes back to settlements in the 1600s. But it was incorporated in 1700, and in 1775, the governor of Connecticut, who was Jonathan Trumbull Sr., lived in Lebanon. He was the only one of the 13 colonies governors that was elected by the people of the state. Well, not a state, obviously, then a colony, elected by the colonists. All the others were appointed by the British Crown. And so he was very much more attached, I think, to the colonist point of view than a lot of the other governors were. And when the revolution sort of kicked off in 1775, he raised 160 folks to go to Boston, which they got there in 3 days, and were there for the Battle of Bunker Hill. He later was vital in financing the supplies for the revolution, and sort of became one of Washington's most important contributors to the cause of the revolution. So Lebanon has a big history, and the store that he owned was then termed the War Office from 1775 to 1784. All the meetings of his Council of Safety that he created were held in his store, became known as the War Office, which was next to his house. There were so many threats on his life that he built a tunnel between the two so he could travel between the two places without having to go outside. A lot of interesting stuff. And his family is famous from back in those days. He had 4 sons. Jonathan Jr., who was George Washington's secretary during the Revolution and later became also a governor of Connecticut. John Trumbull, who was a famous artist, painted the painting that's on the back of the $2 bill, among many, many other paintings. And that artistry comes from after the war. Joseph Trumbull, who was commissary general, one of the commissary generals during the Revolution. And I'm missing one here, but Joseph Trumbull, his grandson, also became a governor of Connecticut. So 3 generations of governors of Connecticut. One of them was also, and this is probably the one I'm forgetting here, was also one of the ones of the Continental Congress. So anyway, they're pretty well known throughout the Revolution, and George Washington considered him to be vital to the cause of the Revolution. So a little bit about Jonathan Trumbull Sr. and Lebanon. So anyway, sometime in the 40s, the town of Lebanon started doing like a reenactment, what we would call reenactments nowadays. They did reenactments in town. And in 1948, the scout executive from New London's council, which was Pequot Council, only 20 miles to the south, brought like 500, supposedly 500 scouts to Lebanon for what they started to call the pilgrimage to Lebanon. But he just brought them there, and he ran into the head of the Connecticut Society of the Orders of Founders and Patriots of America. It was one of those lineage societies like the Daughters of the American Revolution, the Sons of the American Revolutions. There's all these lineage societies that came to be after the 1876 centennial of the United States. And the Orders of Founders and Patriots of America still exists. And in order to be a member, you have to trace in your male line back to one of the earliest settlers of what became the United States, and also in that same male line have to have somebody who served the cause of independence in the American Revolution. So I guess you didn't have to be a soldier, but you had to somehow serve the cause of independence. So the Order of Founders and Patriots. This guy ran into Burdick, who was the scout executive in New London, got to chatting on the street, I guess, and Burdick had a vision of having a scout encampment on the green in Lebanon during this event that they held every year. And Harry Morse had this idea, hey, this would be a great idea. This would serve, our cause as well. Let's do this. And so he brought it to his chapter, the Order of Founders of Patriots. They thought it was a great idea, and they got together with the Nathan Hale chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution, and a couple of other organizations of the same ilk, and they put together something called the Lebanon Foundation, and decided to have this scout camporee that would be held at the same time as the pilgrimage to Lebanon every year. So 1948, Boy Scouts were not involved, but Pequot Council Scouts were there. Starting in 1949, then, they have this camporee that's held on the green in Lebanon, Connecticut. And it went on from 1949 through 1956. And I don't know why it stopped after 56, but it did. And during that period of time, it was a big deal. It started out with 600 scouts in 1949 from the 15 councils in Connecticut, and then expanded over time to include councils and troops from all over New England. As many as 2,000 scouts camping on the green over this weekend. And Eastern Connecticut Council, where Lebanon is situated, the council out of Norwich, started to actually hold their annual Camporee at the pilgrimage to Lebanon as part of the whole thing. And the Eastern Connecticut Council Scout executive was the one who, sort of organized the Scouts' participation in this event. So it was a big deal in the time. There's a lot about it you can read in the newspaper. The Hartford Courant covered it extensively. And like I said, it went on until 1956. Scouts who went got a patch. Troops who went got a streamer to put on their flagpole. Councils apparently got a plaque. And then they started having this essay contest, an essay contest for the Scouts who went, talking about their experience at one, or talking about Lebanon, or talking about the revolution, or whatever. And they were judged, and there were prizes for that. This is the letter that went out to all the councils in Connecticut in 1949, inviting them to this new event. I have a copy of it here. So it talks about the event, what the background was, so forth and so on, that they were going to invite all the councils in Connecticut. You saw it on the first page, but the 1949 patch is the first one. It says Pilgrimage to Lebanon. It depicts the War Office, dated 1949, and it has F&P. And this is one people go, what's F&P? Well, that's Founders and Patriots. And then, of course, BSA. And they had a program every year that they gave out to people that went, that had the whole outline of all the events of the pilgrimage to Lebanon. Of course, the Scouts were part of that. It's very large. It's more than 8.5 by 11. Very well produced. And this is the picture of the 1949 pilgrimage to Lebanon. And you can see the Scout in the center between Washington and Governor Trumbull. And it talks about strengthening the arm of liberty, which we're familiar with that during that period of time. That was a Scout, a National Scout theme. And this says, George Washington thanks his right arm of strength, Governor Jonathan Trumbull. So this was the second pilgrimage, first one being in 1948, that the Scouts were not officially involved in. And then 1949, the one that the Boy Scouts started. And that's a twill patch. When you saw it up closer, that's a twill patch, cut edge. In 1950, for whatever reason, they did it as a felt. It's the only one that I'm aware of that's felt, silk screened. Basically the same design, has the War Office on it. Instead of just having 1949, it says War Office 1775, 1950. Now, 1950 was the 250th anniversary of Lebanon, Connecticut. So 1700 to 1950. And that was the third pilgrimage. This is the third pilgrimage and Camporee. Now it says Lebanon Pilgrimage and Camporee brochure program, big program, from 1950, held in August rather than in June, to coincide with Lebanon's 250th celebration. Some of the stuff from the inside from 1950. Now they have pictures of the Scouts on the camping on the green and marching from 1949. They couldn't do that in 49 because it didn't exist in 48. Information about the War Office and Governor Trumbull's house and the underground tunnel and all kinds of good stuff here. And this was from the invitation. This 4-page thing is the invitation to the fourth pilgrimage in 1951. 51, you can see they changed the look of the patch a bit by going to this really dark navy blue twill with a yellow cut edge and yellow lettering. You can see also, by the way, I meant to mention this before, you notice you see F&P here on the first two patches. F&P disappears, it just says BSA. But it was held under the auspices of the Lebanon Foundation, which was not just the F&P. 1951 program, same thing here, very similar. A letter here to somebody in Haverhill, Massachusetts, who wanted to go. That would have been Lone Tree Council at the time. And he had written to them about, wanting to bring his troop and so forth. So, it really shows that there were Scouts from other states by this point that were going. In 1950, the second year, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Massachusetts had sent troops. 52, same patch as 51, they just changed the date to 1952. There's a picture here of the Adjutant General of the Connecticut National Guard presenting a streamer to a troop from Norwich, Connecticut. So you can see the streamers they got. I don't have any of the streamers. I've never seen one. And I should add too, in 1949, the first one that was officially with the BSA, they presented a large, they called it a shield. I think it's probably a plaque, but a shield to Pequot Council because they had come in 1948 and this was their second pilgrimage. Everybody else, it was their first pilgrimage, but for them, it was the second. They got a big shield, and the shield was then put in the War Office. I have not been to the War Office, although I hope to visit while I'm still up here in Massachusetts. I wonder if it's still on the wall, but at any rate, they did that in 1949 for those guys only. Pictures here from the massive scouts trooping along, parading, the campfire, all kinds of good stuff. This is the leaflet and schedule of events from 1952. The same guy, I got his collection of stuff at a traderie one year. The same guy in 1952 wrote about bringing his troop, and he also asked for badges, and they presented some. They sent him some badges. They didn't have all of them. 1953. Then here's the 53 patch, same as 1951, 1952. The program again, 1953. That's their cover, same cover every year, pretty much the same anyway. So the essay contest. So this is really interesting. So they had this essay contest, and apparently it started in 1950, and there were rules of what to write about and so forth. And then they would have a judging, bigwigs would judge this thing and decide who wrote the best essays, and they would present them with prizes. And in 1950, the guy who won got a silver ring. I have an article from the Hartford Courant about him getting a silver ring. Obviously never seen it. But after that, they started awarding typewriters. So Hartford is one of the capitals of the typewriter industry, or was back in those days. And this is back in the days before electric typewriters. But these were portable typewriters. And they had this essay contest. This was 1952. And the first prize was an Underwood Finger Flight Champion portable typewriter, and it came in a case. Second prize was the Underwood Finger Flight Universal portable typewriter, and third prize was the Underwood Leader portable typewriter. That was a big deal to have a typewriter back in those days, and a manual typewriter. My first high school graduation gift from my parents in 1972 was an electric portable typewriter. Went off to college with that before computers, and I was the hit because I had a typewriter. Anyway, so they had typewriters as gifts. Another photo of the Lebanon War Office. This is a history of Lebanon's involvement in the Revolutionary War, and it was significant. This was a essay contest flyer for 1952. And now notice I see 1953, and now we're at 1956. 1956 is the last patch, same design. I have never seen a 1954 or a 1955 patch. So clearly, if anybody ever sees one, I'm your guy. Looking for a 1954 and a 1955 patch. After 56, that was the end. And the Girl Scouts, I should have mentioned the Girl Scouts. The Girl Scouts started attending at the fourth of these, so that would have been 49, 50, 51, 52. They only came on Saturday. They didn't camp. They weren't, obviously you wouldn't have camped the Girl Scouts with the Boy Scouts, and the Girl Scouts didn't camp usually anyway. So the Girl Scouts came on Saturday. The Boy Scouts came on Friday for the most part and stayed all the way through Sunday. There was an awards ceremony where they handed out the patches and the streamers and the plaques, and it was a pretty big deal. So anyway, it's a camporee for what started out to be the 15 councils in Connecticut, expanded into other states in New England, and I know in 1952 there were 72 troops that were there, and it became bigger than that. This is a very large village green in the town of Lebanon, Connecticut. So it's part of our history in scouting, and it celebrates the history of the American Revolution. And that's it.